Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. It is 5:30. I can confirm that our streaming and our recording is on. You may begin the meeting when you wish.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good afternoon, councillors and SLT and members of the viewing public. I see that we indeed have quorum, so I call into session this regular council meeting on Tuesday, May the 3rd, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. As usual at this time, we have the land recognition statement read by a councillor, and tonight it shall be read by Councillor Hahn. Councillor?
Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to ask Holly to read this. I don't have this in front of me. I apologize.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, of whom we contribute to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And now we move on to the approval of agenda. Back to you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the agenda for the May 3rd, 2022 regular meeting of council be adopted as circulated. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any amendments.
Okay, first of all, after looking at the agenda, does any councillor have an amendment they would like to put forward? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. That does bring you to your next item, which is the disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Thank you. After viewing the agenda, does any councillor have a pecuniary interest or general nature thereof to declare? Councillor Kaur?
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor. And it relates back to 10.2.4. Earlier this year, I declared a conflict of interest in this issue. I did reach out to the Integrity Commissioner, and he gave me clear and precise recommendations verbally and in a written document that I will not breach or break any code of conduct if I participated in the debates or voted in this matter. And Mr. Mayor, I think Holly has that document. Am I correct, Holly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, you have provided that for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kaur. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings you to your next agenda item, which is the COVID pandemic update presentation brought to you by both Chief Limburner and the CAO, Mr. David Cribbs.
Okay, thank you. Chief Limburner, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, council members and members of SLT. Just a few quick numbers here. So as of today, Pelham has a total active case count of 147. Our active rate is currently based on a population of 10,000 per is 3.0, and we're the fourth lowest in the region. Niagara region had 1,660 new cases, total deaths 544. Niagara region hospital admissions in the past 28 days, there's been 80 acute admissions. ICUs have gone down by 5. There has been 0 ICU on ventilator admissions. Our ICU currently sits at, on the ventilator side, sits at 40% capacity. So our numbers are continuing to trend down. Ontario had new daily case count today of 1,547, total deaths of 12,585. Hospital admissions, acute 1,707, of those 212 are in ICU, and of those 84 on ventilators. Ontario's case doubling times at 917 days, which has continued to improve. Positivity rate continues to go down. It's currently at 18.1%. Canada's new cases in the past 7 days, 54,519. There's been a total death count of 39,230, and the unfortunate number there is that 60.3% of all deaths are within unvaccinated persons. Niagara Region Public Health, they're currently working with 29 active outbreaks. As far as our vaccination numbers go in the Niagara region, our first dose is at 2.8%, second dose 83.9%. The province is 3.3% first dose and 86.9% second dose, and across the country 5% first dose and 81.87% second dose. Across the town, all employees are still required to wear masks when the situation dictates, and that seems to be working. We certainly have had a decrease in the number of employees that have reported positive testing, so the mask mandate seems to be working. GoVax Plus continues to operate at the MCC. There is a number of dates coming up. Our communications division has posted that in our website. So if anybody's interested in those dates, you can look those up. And that's the end of my report. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Upon hearing the report, any councillors have any questions or comments to make? I see Councillor Kaur.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the chief. On May 16th, is that the day the Ontario lifts the emergency order?
Excuse me. I thought that expired last week. I could be wrong. I'll have to look that up. I can get back to you.
I could be wrong, so also, sir. I just wonder how would that look, or what does that look after the emergency is lifted?
As far as the municipality goes, our mask mandates, our mask policies, our internal policies will still be in place. We have undeclared the emergency in the town, so it's really dealing with our mask mandate is really the only thing we have on the table right now. And our emergency management committee is still meeting on Mondays.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other questions or comments for the chief? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. This is the first week that we've combined both the fire chief and Mr. Cribb's presentation, so I don't know if the CAO has anything further to contribute or...
Mr. CAO?
Well, I think maybe just for clarification, the policy is primarily working at Town Hall, and Town Hall, which I know everyone on the call obviously has been in many times and oft, is not a particularly large building. When we go to serve the public, the biggest space is the atrium on the ground floor at what I think is officially called the back of the building. And even that just really doesn't allow for much in the way of physical distancing when providing service to the public. Accordingly, Town Hall staff seem to be quite happy to be masking, and so that's working well. But it's really dictated by the size of the building as opposed to any particularly unique circumstance in that part of the town. And it's working well thus far.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. CAO. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. We do have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that Council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from B. Limburner, Fire Chief, and Community Emergency Management Coordinator, and D. Cribbs, Chief Administrative Officer, for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any other comment.
Okay. One last time, councillors, any comments or questions on the report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Counselor Hahn,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your next item on the agenda, and that is delegations. We do have a registered delegate here tonight, and that is Sharon Cook, and she is the chair of the Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee. And if it's okay, I'd like to ask Ms. Leach to bring Ms. Cook into the meeting. I see that we do have Ms. Cook in the meeting. I just remind her that presenters are entitled to 10 minutes. And at that mark, I will let you know when you get to 10 minutes.
Okay. Ms. Cook, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and town staff. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm sure many of you are well aware of what the Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee is and what it's done, seeing that 3 councillors sitting at the table tonight have been or are part of the Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee. Councillor Hildebrand was a member, Councillor Olson was a member, and as you know, Councillor Stewart is the council representative on our Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee. What we've done is taken another look at the terms of reference, the goals and priorities for PSAC. It's been some time, and we know that we've accomplished some of those goals. So we did a little bit of a rewrite that I'll go through with you, or with you tonight. I think you're well aware of the terms of reference. We are an advisory committee created to assist the Town of Pelham Council and staff in making decisions on matters that impact quality of life and provide solutions through the lens of the Pelham senior residents. The committee reports directly to Town Council via minutes of its meetings, presentations as requested, and or deemed necessary, and provides an annual report. Our membership hasn't changed. It's up to 6 Town of Pelham residents, and try to represent a geographical cross-section of Pelham. We're to have 1 Youth Advisory Committee member, 1 Active Transportation Committee member, 1 Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee member, and 2 representatives of organizations serving seniors in Pelham, along with 1 Town of Pelham councillor who is ex officio. And of course, our committee is the envy of all in Niagara because we have a Town of Pelham staff person as a resource. And we're one of the few committees that actually have that advantage. Now, our goal is to an age-friendly lens, which means basically that everything that we do, everything we create, we do it through the eyes of a senior to ensure that they have access and are able to negotiate and get around. Our number 1 goal, of course, is funding and resources, very much like every committee and every council. And we look for resource support to carry out some of our programs and projects for the community, particularly as they might apply to housing, which I'll talk a little bit later, public transit, town council, events and activities, and health and well-being. Our second goal is to increase communication with seniors and older adults, or as some call it, the third age. Programs and services through creativity and collaboration to maintain and increase outreach to seniors with and through municipal council, local business, and community organizations. We try to do that with brochures, PSAC's presence at all town events, Summerfest, parades, concerts, etc. And through the Meridian Community Center's Seniors Active Living Center, where we have the advantage of being able to meet for a variety, or were able to meet for a variety of in-house activity. Our third goal is to retain memberships with age-friendly and senior advisory collaboratives to share information to identify success and gaps in age-friendly services. And basically that means that we have an organization where we come together with representatives from all 12 organizations. That way we can keep current on age-friendly resources, find out what other age-friendly groups are doing, and whose age-friendly principles to guide PSAC. And that's really important because we are designated as a member of the WHO, the World Health Organization, Global Network of Age-Friendly Cities and Communities. Now, just to brag a little bit, because we, in spite of the fact that we weren't able to meet as a committee per se, but through Zoom meetings, we were, again, one of the few age-friendly committees that actually carried on with monthly meetings through this pandemic. So it gave us an opportunity, if not to do things physically and together, at least to come up with some ideas and to do some things. We've talked about just the Zoom meetings or a hybrid model, but we have been able to keep it going. The Meridian Community Center's qualification is as an Ontario Active Centre for Seniors, Older Adult Centres Association of Ontario, gave us the opportunity for some additional funding, which has also been very helpful. We used to have, and many of you will remember, the annual Seniors Fair, which was always extremely well attended. We're hoping, if all goes well, that perhaps this fall, depending on restrictions, we're hoping to be able to do that one more time. Last year, we also have the 55 plus lounge. Again, we haven't been able to use it as such, but we certainly will as soon as the go is clear. The purchase and installation of 2 flag poles, accessible outdoor seating, and 1 conversation bench. Another term for that is the buddy bench, where you can meet with seniors, they can sit, you can meet with them, talk, let them know what's happening for seniors in this community. The seniors celebratory garden, and at which many of you had attended, and the raising of the seniors flag at the municipal building. Number of programs have been able to carry on, even though we couldn't meet. One is Art Your Service. It's an online daily activity for seniors. Say It, which is seniors and youth intergenerational theater, and I think perhaps some of you may have seen their work a couple of years ago. The VIP program, which is volunteers for this program, did receive some training, and you may see us from time to time wandering around in a blue vest there to help and talk to people. And with so many new people coming into the community, it's the perfect opportunity to have a conversation, show them around, and let them know what's going on there. We're hoping to have a welcome back party at the MCC, but I guess we'll wait and see about that. Speaker and learning series. We did try a couple of things. Unfortunately, it was very difficult to convince a lot of seniors in town that they could join us by phone. They didn't need a computer or any other device. It was strictly a call in, but we didn't get all of the support that we were hoping we would. And we had some interesting topics, so we'll try that again. Tech support for seniors. I know that there have been a few people who have come to the MCC or called to get assistance, getting online and learning about Zoom and how to use certain programs. The problem that seemed to appear, some of the equipment that they had was too old even for the new up-to-date program. So they were caught in that situation where they didn't have enough updated technological equipment in order to handle a lot of the programs that are available today. We were also very involved, and a number of people outside of PSAC, but volunteers in this community, were involved in the Brock University research project. Two doctors, Dr. Mia Hiroshima and Dr. Polly Gardner, were dealing with all of the 12 municipalities and talking about volunteerism as another way to get seniors who have some free time, have some spare time, to get involved in their community. And we're waiting, actually, we expect to have a full report back from them in September. Public education, we've had a series on finances for seniors, fall prevention, and anti-fraud. And you've probably been made aware that we will be having Brock Godfrey join us on May the 5th. It was the 11th, but unfortunately he had to make a change. So he'll be here on the 5th. And if there's people out there that haven't signed up, they're more than welcome to, and there's still room. And it's well worth the time. It starts at 10:30 in the morning. Lunch is provided, and it will guaranteed be interesting, and guarantee you'll learn a lot. And part of it has to do with things like these cards, Visa cards, and so on. A lot of people in this community have been scammed by getting these cards and using those instead of money for scammers. So that's something that we really need to be careful about. Part of our job, age-friendly awareness and advocacy, we have been involved regionally to a pretty good extent. I was part of the leadership council that helped create the Age-Friendly Niagara Council, and they're still working on membership and those sorts of things there. Also, one of the two representatives of the Niagara Older Adult Alliance, and those are just representatives from each of the 12 municipalities that get together and share information and learn from each other. And we like to have more involvement with the Youth Advisory Committee. They are part of SARET, so we do have that intergenerational event that we do. More learning, presentations on the issues such as elder abuse. I've been part of 2 or 3 meetings now talking about elder abuse, how we can get the information out there, and where we can direct them if they think that they may be having an issue. So that's something that we're continuing to work on. We had a presentation a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, by Dr. Alicia Grigorovich, professor at Brock, who has done a lot of research in the digital divide and equity when it comes to seniors, whether it be facilities or at home or different environments. So she had a very interesting presentation to our PSAC members. And again, the elder abuse, we're in the planning stages of somehow creating some flyers or putting something in the paper that will help people if they need help or if they suspect that they're being abused. And you may think that's strange, but a lot of seniors are and don't know it. So this is all part of trying to be of some assistance and get them redirected to the help that they might need.
1 minute warning.
Proposals.
Just a 1 minute warning.
Okay, I'm right there. Okay. Upcoming, we had a couple meetings ago met with Mr. Cribbs and the town planner, and we were to have organized a meeting between PSAC and the planners so that the town or the members can understand about bylaws and official plans and all those sorts of things, because part of our mandate is to be involved, and we need some training to do that. So that hasn't happened yet, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to that fairly soon. so that we can provide the input to the mayor and council as per our responsibilities under our World Health Organization certification. So that in a nutshell, councilors, mayor, is where we're at. Thank you very, very much for your support over the past 4 years. And I'd like to throw out a special thanks to the staff that we have at the MCC. I can't imagine finding better, more involved and capable people than we have in our supporters for Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee. So thank you very much, and good luck with the rest of your meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Obviously, I appreciate you coming to council and giving us this great report. It's great to see that your group is definitely providing the seniors in the town with multiple learning experiences and keeping them active. I will now open it to council. Any members of council wishing comments or questions to the presenter? And the first hand was Councillor Kaur.
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor, to Mrs. Cook, and thank you very much for your presentation. I know several times you and I talked, and I assure you, and I think I assured you at the time, that in my business, we will not sell any seniors gift cards over $500, especially Apple credit cards and also Google cards. If I'm not mistaken, I think I told you, and I don't know if the rest of the council knows, that I think my staff probably stopped 2 to 3 fraud incidents, and I know the customers came back later and appreciated it. When a situation like that happens, we usually ask them to go back and talk to their sons or daughters or someone close to them, because they are being scammed, and again, they didn't realize what was happening. And with the Apple, Google, and the credit cards, once the number is processed, it's in cyberspace, and the fraud police would never trace it. They can't trace it. So the company that provides us with those cards, Blackhawk, is trying to work out something that this stops. And I hope you could give that message to other large retailers who sell multi-gift cards, because it's shameful that these individuals would prey on older people. So again, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. And thank you for taking a lead with your staff in stopping this. The best thing we can do is to alert everybody, not just seniors, but everybody, that if somebody wants to be paid by a card, it's probably a scam.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mrs. Cook, for your presentation. I enjoyed being on your committee. It was a highlight of 8 years of my life.
Well, we enjoyed having you.
Thank you so much. But there are 2 issues that as a counselor, I run into all the time, and one of them I just resolved again today. And that issue is, I have a lot of seniors who are very active, and they still travel across the border because they get family and friends there, and a lot of them go on vacation. They're doing cruises, they're going here and there, and they're constantly being harassed by Canada after they've arrived. They have no problem coming through the border, but one lady just probably has spent a month trying to get it resolved, even though she's got all the paperwork, had all the vaccinations and all that kind of stuff. It is so difficult for them to get free once they have a problem. And it was only through the help of the MP and his office trying to get through that. And I'm sure I've had other residents with that same problem. So that's a problem that I, as a counselor, try and help seniors with. And I'm not sure whether your group is aware of it. The second problem, which is even more prevalent, I find that a lot of seniors, if they're transported to the hospital by an ambulance, they cannot get someone to go with them. And it's very difficult, even now, for that loved one or partner to get in there. And I had one just probably over a month ago where they were able to get in, but then they went home because it was a 4 o'clock ride with the ambulance. When they came back later to get in for the second time, they weren't allowed in. And it's such a tragedy for these seniors. You know, they're left alone. They don't understand. They don't have cell phones.
They need an advocate. Mm-hmm.
They need an advocate. And it seems as though the healthcare system has lost the fact that these seniors need this assistance. I mean, it's such a tragedy, and they call me because I'm the only one that can get on the phone. I try and do what I can, but other than being sympathetic, I don't necessarily have the answer because I don't know what to do. I am part of the Niagara Health system. I have a special card because of my credentials that I have, so I can get into the Niagara Health, and I have access to a lot of their stuff. But even with that access card that I have, which allows me to go in anytime, anywhere, anyhow, it's I don't know how to change the system. You know,
Well, I don't know how to change the system, but I do know that we have access to the Niagara Regional Council on Aging and also to the Niagara Older Alliance. And if I can certainly bring up that issue, because I totally agree. I mean, I don't think anybody should go into the hospital without an advocate, but you know, particularly seniors. So I will bring those up. I will bring those issues up because they are of great concern, I think, to a number of people. And I appreciate you mentioning that, Councillor.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, and to Ms. Cook. I too enjoyed my time on the committee. It wasn't that long, but it was very enjoyable and very informative, and gave me somewhat of a push to become more involved in the community. I do want to ask about what your thoughts are on volunteers, because I'm not sure that volunteers and service club members are coming back as fast as they might be expected to be after COVID. It just seems to me like every organization that I speak to or involved with looks like the difficulty is people left for COVID and they're just not coming back.
Ms. Cook?
Well, I can understand them being, you know, a bit fearful at this point because
Yep.
none of the direction is clear. You know, one day it's one thing, another day it's something else. And I think seniors being a little bit hesitant about taking that step when things are not definitive can create a problem. I think, and one of the things that we want to do, and as I mentioned, with the two doctors doing a presentation for us in September, is to try and entice more people to be volunteers. And, you know, we think about it from a senior's perspective, but there are a lot of people out there who are not seniors who would benefit from being a volunteer in some respect in either a community organization or a sport or library or whatever. But we need to create a situation and a learning environment for them to be able to step forward and know that it's safe to do it. And hopefully by September, we'll be in that position.
Yes, thank you for that. Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, I really appreciate the fact that you're doing that, because there's, you know, I have my own selfish reasons for volunteering, and it's generally because of the kind of wholesome satisfaction you get from being part of some of these organizations that we have. The other point I would like to make is your VIP program, which I think is, I've been in the MCC and had terrific experiences with the people I've met there. The training must have been excellent, because people are very, very customer service oriented. And I was so impressed to the point that I proposed a VIP program to the global geopark system, and I think that's going to be taken up with.
Very good.
I believe that Pelham's model will be the model used for that across Canada, with the 6 geoparks and hopefully the next one in Niagara.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. And the instructors were very good. Our two of our staff members were very involved in that and did an excellent job. And there again, we need to entice more people to get involved. We started out with, I think, around 25, and as you mentioned, you know, with the pandemic, they've sort of drifted off. So we need to work some more to get people reinstated and interested in what we're doing.
Councillor, done. Is that it, Councillor Olson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mrs. Cook. I just want to tell everyone that I attended the fraud seminar that was held in the past with Mr. Godfrey, and he provided a lot of humor and a wealth of information that everyone could benefit from, not just seniors. Exactly. So I just want to encourage anyone who's able to attend this. And Mrs. Cook, am I to understand that it's going to be a hybrid version where you can watch it at home as well?
I'm not sure if they're set up for that yet or not, but we can take 180 people in the Kersey room, and lunch is provided. It runs from 10:30 in the morning, then lunch, and then another session at 2:30 in the afternoon. The one in the afternoon, I think, is more technical. Brock was hoping to bring one of the RCMP officers with him that specialize in that area, but unfortunately, they seem to be extremely busy in Ottawa and can't get away. So Brock will do both. He's done both before, so he'll be doing both of them. But I don't know about the hybrid. I'd have to check and with the staff there and see if that's ready to go. I'm not sure. We were hoping it would be, but I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments to the presenter? Not seeing any. Sharon, I have one question. I was at that seminar that I believe it was your group that brought in, maybe it was the regional seniors, and there's a professor from Hamilton, McMaster University, saying the number one condition with seniors is loneliness. Does your group have a program whereas you would have seniors reaching out to seniors? Do you have anything like that in your works right now?
Not at this time, and I think part of that is because of the pandemic and people going into other people's homes right now. The technical aspects were meant to happen that way as well, but as we all know, people are a little more hesitant about, you know, traveling from one house to another at this particular time. So you're very right. Loneliness is a more serious aspect than drinking or smoking on a senior's health. And that's what came out of that seminar that we did have, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. I guess I was thinking in this day and age of everyone getting better or getting used to Zoom, and of course, depends, of course, on how computer literate that the seniors would be, but either through Zoom or through phone calls, I thought that perhaps you could reach out to them that way. But maybe something in the future then, perhaps.
I hope so, because I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. I don't know that many are on Zoom, but even I don't know if we could set something up in some other way, and it's probably by telephone right now.
Sure.
And then we could move maybe into a friendly visiting kind of event or relationship with some of the seniors that are on their own in the community.
Yes, especially maybe in the summer months, even if you meet on the porch, perhaps.
Yes, exactly. Good point.
Okay.
If it comes.
There we go. Okay, Sharon, again, thank you for your presentation tonight and coming to make it in the council at council. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we turn to the clerk.
3, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that Council receive the delegation from Sharon Cook regarding an update on the Pelham Seniors Advisory Committee for information to you, Mr. Mayor, for any further debate.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments on the presentation? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. I would just ask Ms. Leach to go ahead and remove Ms. Cook from the meeting. If you could just give us a moment to accommodate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do see that we can now move on to our next item on the agenda. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. 1 RC 08/2022, Regular Council, April 19th, 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, I'd ask that you call for any errors or omissions.
Okay, thank you. After looking at the minutes in question, is there any councillor that noticed omissions or other such things? Yeah, I see Councillor Kaur.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to correct, I was wrong on the May the 16th. I guess it was February the 23rd. So I apologize. I misread something. So I just want the records to state I must have misread something. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kaur. Councillor Stewart, did I see your hand up? No? Okay, sorry. Any other councillor have any omissions on the minutes? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The vote begins with Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item 7 on the agenda. This is the request to lift consent agenda items. As council is aware, you only are required to request an item be lifted if you wish to change the resolution attached. Otherwise, you can simply just discuss when we get to the consent agenda. To you, Mr. Mayor, to call for any items to be lifted by council.
Thank you. I won't even ask the question. I see Councillor Wink, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to lift 8.3.1 and 8.3.2, please.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, that's 8.31 and 8.32.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have so noted.
Thank you. And is there any other councillor that would like to lift item? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes. I was going to lift exactly the same item, 8.3.2, electric vehicle charging.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other items to be lifted? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. So we will have noted 8.3.1 and 8.3.2. We will move on to the consent agenda. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the May 3rd, 2022 council agenda be received and recommendations therein contained be approved. Save and accept item 8.3.1 and 8.3.2. To you, Mr. Mayor, council can now discuss all other items on the consent agenda.
Okay, any other items? Oh, I see Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to discuss 8.3.3, which is the retrofitting buildings with solar panels. What I want to point out to council is that retrofitting to solar panels is just the start of what we should be doing. We should be including this in our building code as all buildings should be created solar ready, because by the year 2030, electricity generation has to double to meet the standards of 50 by 30, which is a well-accepted standard by several members of our community, including 50 by 30, Climate Caucus, PATH, the whole the whole group of green friends that we have in the community want to see this happen. And this is one opportunity, and it goes back to build it right the first time. And that's something that we should be preparing to adapt. We've, doubling the electricity generation by 2030 is going to be quite a task. And there's several tasks included in what has to happen as time we got started. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Olson. Any other items to be lifted? Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak on the same item as well. I agree with Councillor Olson. There's a lot of work to be done on these solar panel arrays. The one area of concern I have is the issue with the hydro supply that the province of Ontario has. We know that in 2028, Pickering is going down. That's a nuclear plant. Right now, it was extended a couple of years ago to 2028. That's 14% of our electricity. Right now, the Independent Electrical Suppliers Organization is working on terms of purchase of coming up power. And one of the things that they've talked about is the fact that they're looking at terms such as all these supplies like solar, wind, ones that are variable, that aren't constant. They're asking potentially for a 4-hour supply minimum requirement, and if you can't meet that, then you don't qualify to bid on the project. So I believe it's important that when staff comes back with a consultant, that it's incumbent upon the consultant to be aware of the significant changes that are happening in the energy market with regards to the direction of the province is going and the terms that the Independent Electrical Supplier Organization is setting as directed by the power requirement of the province. So I agree. This is something that, in combination with what Councillor Olson has said, has to be taken into account because it's becoming very complex, this issue, and how effectively power is going to be supplied in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other on this subject? Not seeing any. Any other on any other consent agenda other than the ones that were lifted? Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. 8.5.3.1.
Yes.
Which is the report of water loss reduction program. And I want to mention that I'm hopeful that we see an improvement in this. We have an opportunity with the money that we have, and I'm not expecting huge things because we've been assured by staff that we're in the range. But I think this is an opportunity to see us get some reduction in the amount of water that leaks out of our system. And I also want to commend staff on the one event that happened to us last year, and I was getting calls from people that were in the shower and the water turned off and lost their hot water pressure. And we eventually determined that it was the valve at Sunset and Canberra, which through the cooperation of the region and the town, we got replaced and haven't had a complaint since. So that's, I wanted to mention that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I also had 8.5.31. I wanted to ask our Public Works Director, this started out at the region, from Regional Council, and it's basically a look at the regional trunk systems in the water systems. And I see to the Director of Public Works that it's possible that they may reinstate a committee looking at the loss of water. I'm hoping not only on the regional system, but also within the municipal systems. Any comments you have on on the likelihood of this committee being reformed, or any steps the region has taken so far on the testing of the water trunks?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not specifically aware of the committee yet, but obviously we'll be following up with the region with regards to that. The town also does undertake its own water loss study. It's not every year, but we will be completing that work this year as well to investigate critical local municipal mains and try to identify leaks and possible water losses through the system. So it's a modest budget, but we do some of that work, and we try to do that annually. But we will definitely follow up with the region on the committee and see if we can extend it from the regional mains to local mains. That would be something we would consider discussing with them.
Great, thank you. I know there is quite a bit of interest at the regional level about the checking the regional system for any substantial leaks, even before it gets through the municipal discharge pipes. Thank you for that, Director. Any other items to be lifted? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So this is for the items listed on the consent agenda, save and accept the 2 items that have been lifted and earlier noted. And the motion's been put forward by Councillor Olson and seconded by Councillor Wink. The vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. And that does bring you to your 2 items which have been lifted for separate consideration. And the first item is the analysis of the Steve Bauer Trail nomenclature. And this is the original motion attached is be it resolved that Council receive report 2022-0065 analysis of Steve Bauer Trail nomenclature and signage for information, and that Council consider approving trail signage improvement projects in future operating and capital budgets. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, Councillor Wink, I believe you lifted this item. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Cook, thank you very much for providing this report. It's something that has been brought forward by the Pelham Active Transportation Committee. I'd like to add something to the recommendation, and that would be that staff complete a cost analysis for the number of signs required, design, and materials in order for a shovel-ready project that could be utilized for future potential grants.
Okay. Any discussion on this by any other councillors?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would just be
go
looking,
ahead.
sorry, this is an amendment, and I do have Councillor Wink as the mover, and we would just be looking for a seconder.
Okay, yeah, sorry. And I see Councillor Hildebrand will second that. Thank you,
Mr.
Councillor. Discussion on the amendment then. Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's an excellent idea. The Steve Bauer Trail is used, it gets significant use. And there's so many cyclists these days, and especially people from out of town that are using it. It is a well-known area for cyclists and people using those trails for that. And I think signage is a great addition to those trails.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on the amendment? I see Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I would like to see something included for the natural features of the trail, and I wrote down a couple of examples. And I think it's important to keep the signs current, but I would put I would have signs for meadow restoration and asking people to be patient while our natural growth took place. Engineered habitat, for example, like we've got some habitats that are engineered along the trail, and I would make it a very common sign also for things like our our new pollinator gardens at Centennial Park. They should have a sign with them to tell people what those are, because including the what we planted in those gardens, because people need to be informed about that.
Okay, I don't know if the pollinator gardens, are they along the Sea Barbara Trail, or is that another item altogether? Councillor.
And I'm sure we can find them there.
Okay, well, let's go to Manager of Public Works. Ryan, you got any comments on that?
Yeah, for sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think if we do find some naturalized areas, there are a number of interpretive sign examples that we could start setting up in some of these places. It's entirely doable. The interpretive sign is about $1,300 installed, so these things are we can do, and we can start planning for in the future.
Through
Okay,
you,
thank you.
Ms.
And I see the CAO has a comment.
It's entirely possible, if it's the will of council, for us to do both. The beauty of a truly good shovel-ready project has a couple of different price points. So we could, in fact, price out signage that's to assist with transportation, item A, and signage that supports or interacts with the environment and talks about rare species along the way, et cetera, habitat and so forth. So we could do them separately within the report, and then be more shovel ready depending on what sort of grants are available. They need not be, I think we can accommodate both if it's the will of council.
Yep, okay, yeah, thank you. Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to mention that we do have a motion on the floor, moved and seconded, and I would just look to see if the councillors who moved and seconded, if they have any issues with this being a friendly amendment, just to add, and that staff are directed to also review natural feature signs, as Councillor Olson has indicated.
Thank you. Councillor Wink?
Yeah, I have no problem adding that to the motion.
Okay, and Councillor
Olson.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Me neither.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So unless there's any objection from council, we'll consider that to be a friendly amendment to this amendment. So council wishes, they can still continue their debate.
Okay. Now, with this friendly amendment to the amendment, any other debate, questions on the amendment and the friendly amendment? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So this is for the amendment, which includes the friendly amendment, and the vote on this begins with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The amendment carries, and then that brings you to the main motion as amended.
Okay, so on the main motion as amended, any further discussion on this item? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. The vote again will begin with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next item, which is the electric vehicle station. And the attached resolution to this report was, be it resolved that Council receive report 2022-0111 for information regarding the electric vehicle charging stations. Again, that's for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. And I believe Councillor Wink, you pulled that item also?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just this goes along with the discussion that we had regarding retrofitting municipal facilities with solar panels. This motion has to do with climate change, and there's going to be more and more electric vehicles on the road going forward. So it's another step that we as a municipality need to do and look at it and make improvements on that. And I'd like to make a further motion that council directs staff to investigate financial impacts on all three options that were outlined in this report, and report back to council if necessary, and that staff are directed to include associated costs to implementing the said option with the 2023 budget for council consideration.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. So I do have Councillor Wink as the mover for that amendment. I would be looking for a seconder.
Okay, and do we have a seconder? And I see Councillor Kaur as seconding.
Okay, I do. Then council can go ahead and debate.
Okay, and now with a seconder, we will indeed open up the motion to a debate. And Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Wink, you must have read my paperwork. Your motion is almost reads exactly the same as I prepared for Holly. So she already had mine, and she probably had yours as well. Let me talk about some of the things in advance that possibly will help staff. Number one, for the financing of these projects, Natural Resources Canada, NRCan, will be launching the next round of funding under the Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program on May the 5th, which is a couple days from now. The project will fund 50% of the project cost, up to $5 million per project, or $5,000 per level 2 charger, and 50% of a level 3 charger, up to a $50,000 max. The second point I'd like to make are the things for staff to investigate are suppliers. There's two major suppliers that I see on the market, and I'm going to be talking about one. NRCan is linked with the company called FLO. The other largest charger in the world is called ChargePoint. They manage the world's largest network of electric vehicle charging stations, both publicly and privately. Dave Cano, who's a member of the Utility Sustainability Committee, the energy efficiency manager for Oakville, was involved in 2021 in Oakville's 28 dual charging station installations. They installed the ChargePoint 4000 dual vehicle at a level 2 station with connectivity of capabilities. That means users need to create an account with ChargePoint. Depending on how it's configured, users can pay for the time they're connected, although it can be free. So it's totally flexible, so it could work for staff, fleet, and the public. As an aside, in Oakville, we know they have the Tesla and BMW dealerships, and their dealerships have free charging stations for their owners, which are proprietary. With regards to fees for service, the town of Oakville has a fee for service for their public stations. The reason they give for that is their fee seems to be very reasonable. The first is $1.50 per hour up to 3 hours, and $5 after 3 hours. The reason why they have a fee is because I don't know if you've been to some of the larger hotels that have these EV hookups. They're in a prime parking spot, and a lot of these spots, whether you go to an arena, and I think the public works director can probably comment on this as well. You go to high level arenas and all this stuff, they got electric charging stations. But sometimes what you see is people that don't have electric cars parking in these stations. And then that creates a big bylaw issue and all kinds of things. So that's another thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is where to put these stations. I should just mention that NPEI, which does the center of town, their commercial electric rates are 15% lower than anything to do with Hydro One, just as a plus. So to me, the town hall area has the greatest potential if you're looking for a bargain. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for those facts and figures, Councillor Hildebrand. Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. There's no doubt that no other generation in the history has been put in this position. We need to go on a carbon diet and really fast, because the figures are As far as vehicle goes, in 1950, there were 100 million vehicles on the roads of this planet. Today, there are 1 billion vehicles on the road. And by the year 2030, which was picked out by 50 by 30 as the turning point, there's going to be 2 billion vehicles on the road, and the average global household is going to have 1.5 vehicles. Most of that growth is going to come some other place. So our carbon diet has to start with ourselves here, and solar vehicle or electric vehicles is going to be one of the things that's important. Build it right the first time would have required that every new construction in the province have electric vehicles roughed in as well as the solar ready. But this has very wide acceptance in the community. In our community, 86% of the people in Canada want a more sustainable future, which is 9 out of 10, which is a highly unlikely number to get in any kind of a survey. So 90% of the people are looking for some change, and this would be a great step for it. I would like to see some kind of consideration given as well for on the bill type financing for these things in these homes, and wherever we can fit that in. And perhaps the car companies are going to come through, but this is going to be a very rapid change that's going to have to take place. And the fastest way we can do it is to get it into our building codes and into our retrofits into existing buildings. So I'll be voting in favor of it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All these facts and figures, I feel like I'm back in science class. Let's see, Madam Clerk, how are we coming on that amendment then?
I do have the amendment. It was that the motion be amended to include, and that council direct staff to investigate financial options of all options within the report and report back to council if necessary, and that staff are directed to include associated costs to implementing the said options within the 2023 budget for council consideration. That is the amendment on the floor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wink, you happy with that amendment?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Corey, you seconded it. You okay also with that amendment?
Yes, I fully agree with what everyone said.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussions, comments on the amendment before us? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. That brings you to the main motion as amended. You may debate.
Okay, now back to the main motion. Any further comments or debate? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Just for the record, I'll be using the same mover and seconder as the amendment. And for the vote, this would also begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your first staff report, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0104, Disconnecting from Work Policy for Information, and that Council approve the Disconnecting from Work Policy S100-15. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on this item? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. That brings you to your next staff report. And I have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0114, Proposed Replacement of Town of Pelham Noise Control Bylaw for information, and that Council approve in principle the proposed noise control bylaw as presented, and that Council direct that the proposed bylaw be presented to Council for consideration at the next regular meeting of Council. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Any discussion on this proposed noise bylaw control? And I see Councillor Hahn.
Yes, through the mayor, I'm just curious. I guess perhaps this still has to be decided, but what are the initial thoughts with regards to the decibels? Like, how are we going to determine what's allowable, what's not? So are we measuring to a particular scale? Obviously, there's equipment that has to be purchased, et cetera. I guess if either the CAO or perhaps Ms. Sturton can speak to that.
Okay, yeah, Ms. Sturton, perhaps.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Hahn. The decibel level that's been selected as part of the definition of clearly audible in the proposed bylaw is 80 decibels. And the basis for that is that according to provincial guidance, that's approximately the level of noise you might encounter in a noisy restaurant. So potentially loud enough to be disruptive without being extremely loud. So that's the basis for the selection of the 80 decibels as part of the definition of clearly audible.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, to the councillor's question, would we be purchasing a reader for that to get a reading like that, Ms. Sturton?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The bylaw department anticipates that they can purchase professional quality sound level monitors that will permit measuring of decibels for approximately $500 to $1,000 per unit. I understand that those monitors can be covered within existing budgets and that we would likely want 2 of them to assist with bylaw enforcement.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? I see Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mrs. Sturton. Section 5.1, 1 through N refers to solid waste, bulk lift, or refuge compacting equipment. Is this referring to garbage dumpsters?
Ms. Sturton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wink. Yes, my understanding is that a solid waste bulk lift or refuse container references dumpsters that may be on commercial property, for instance, where a truck comes in, lifts them up, and empties them into a larger truck receptacle, which is a noise-creating activity, and it occurs in commercial areas as well as other locations.
Right. So we've got, I've had some resident concerns about living close to commercial property, and these dumpsters are being emptied at 5:30 in the morning and waking the residents up. What about regional trucks? It says in the bylaw that they're exempted from the noise, but if a regional truck comes into a commercial area at 5:30 in the morning, they're exempt from making this noise, which seems counterintuitive to what we're trying to do.
Comments, Ms. Sturton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Wink. I think the intention of the exemptions is to permit municipal and regional operations to take place without attracting potential bylaw violations on the part of the town or the region. So certainly the idea is to minimize the noise associated with private operations, but to permit the town and the region to conduct operations that are for the benefit of residents with fewer restrictions.
Yeah, so if I'm a resident and I'm putting out my garbage, I've got to put it out by 7 o'clock. And that's when the trucks come along and pick up my garbage right at 7 o'clock, by the way. But the fact that they're exempt and they can go into a commercial property and do a lift at 5:30 in the morning and disturbs our residents doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me.
Any comment, Ms. Sturton?
I'm quite reluctant to impose limitations on the region. Generally, the municipal bylaws elsewhere in the region contain this very same exemption. I think it's something we could look at, but it would not be something that I think is particularly desirable, although I appreciate the concern of residents hearing the noise. And I'm surprised to hear the garbage truck makes it to your place by 7. That's certainly not been my experience, but it's something that could be considered, but I am concerned about doing so. I would prefer to allow the region to remain exempt in terms of waste collection operations, simply because that's quite standard and also, I think, desirable from a community standpoint.
So then, through you, to you, Mr. Mayor, as one of our regional representatives, is it possible that you could speak to the region and come to some type of understanding that they wouldn't be coming in at all hours of the night or early morning to do their pickups?
I will assure you that I will talk to the regional people, but also I can assure you that the society we live in generates a tremendous amount of garbage, and it takes a very long day for these trucks to make their route. So obviously they start early, and that's why they're there at 5:30. But I will talk to the director of waste management, and I just had to talk to her this week about another in-town situation. So I will indeed make our thoughts known to her for sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor to Ms. Sturton. So this measurement of time, is there going to be, I guess, a qualification with regards to time exposure too? So for instance, if it's a short, boom, and it measures that 8 that you mentioned versus that's for a period of time, like is there going to be a parameter that involves time and the exposure of sound for a time standpoint?
Ms. Sturton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hahn, the bylaw has been prepared in a manner that preserves the discretion of bylaw enforcement officers. So certain types of noise, for instance, noises that are required under the bylaw to be persistent, we've added a definition of persistent that does prescribe a particular time frame during which the noise must be made or must be continued. Otherwise, there are not specific durations that are required for particular kinds of noises. That would be something that would be considered as part of the bylaw officer's exercise of his or her discretion in enforcing, subject always to the provisions of the draft bylaw, which state that certain noises are deemed to be unreasonable. So they don't speak to specific durations other than the persistent piece, which I've mentioned, and that's defined in the context of yelling and shouting and animal noise. But otherwise, it's not defined in terms of duration.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I asked because a dog barks for 5 minutes versus 55 minutes, pretty big difference. So, okay.
Yes, and that's actually one of the examples where the persistent definition applies, and persistent is defined to mean continuously for a period of 10 minutes or longer, or intermittently for an aggregate period of 10 minutes or longer in any 60-minute period.
Okay, so there is a threshold of 10 minutes then. Okay.
For noises that are required to be persistent in order to be prohibited. Certainly that includes animal noise, not just dogs, but animal noise, as well as some human created noise, such as shouting and whistling and persistent singing, things of that nature.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? If I may, Ms. Sturton, I see that the bylaw, I believe, exempts any noise that is created by a normal farm practice. so that if a farmer is indeed out spraying their orchards first thing in the morning, whether it be 5 or 7 o'clock, or perhaps even working their land late into the night, those noises would be exempt. Ms. Turton?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. And that's a statutory requirement under the Normal Farm Practices Act.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments on this proposed bylaw? I'm not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next staff report. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-110, Extension of Draft Plan Approval and Modification to Draft Plan Oak Haven Estates Subdivision for information, and that Council approve the modification to the Oak Haven Estate Draft Plan of Subdivision, and that Council approve a 1-year extension of draft plan approval for Oak Haven Estates Draft Plan of Subdivision with a lapsing date of June 28th, 2023, including the administrative revisions to the conditions requested by the Niagara region. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. On this report and the request for extension, any comments or questions from councillors? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the planning director. The part that concerns me is the original approval occurred in 2012. Then we had a final date in 2022. Now they're asking for June the 28th of next year. How many extensions can a developer obtain? And what assurance do we have that this is the last extension? I mean, how many times do we have to go through this? Because you can keep revising engineering till you could technically say the cows come home. And every time you come up with another reason for an extension, there has to be a time when the time's up. That's really the point I'm trying to make.
Ms. Weens?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Planning Act allows for council to grant extensions. The initial draft plan approval is good for 3 years, and it can be extended again 3 years or less. But it is council's discretion as to whether or not they grant the extension. There is no time limit on terms of the number. Unfortunately, this is a circumstance where draft plan approval was granted in 2012, and at that time there was no defined outlet for storm or sanitary, and it's taken a considerable amount of effort to nail down the outlet for the storm, as well as go through the engineering design solutions for the sanitary sewer. What I can tell you is that the owners have expended considerable amount of engineering design to find those solutions, and they are close to being completed the environmental assessment process for the sanitary sewer pumping station that is required. It was thought that would be completed sometime this month, but it looks like it will probably be more in the order of July or August, but they are making progress, and they're very confident that they can get everything completed. And that's been a big hurdle to clearing the conditions, is that they needed the pumping station, the design, and the approval of that approved. That's one of the conditions of the draft plan of subdivision approval. So this is a situation where, draft plan approval probably shouldn't have been granted. It was premature back in 2012. Nevertheless, it was granted, and it's taken this amount of time to clear the conditions. It's been some 10 years, so it's been a long time.
Councillor?
Mr. Mayor, to the planning director. I know from the report that you say staff time is being charged back to the developer. I hope it's actual very good accounting with regards to the number of hours this developer is being charged, because it just seems like an inordinate amount of years and time that you spent on it. And to me, that's a significant cost, and that should be carried by the developer, not by any chance by the town residents.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor. I see Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Weens. It appeared to me that the changes that are being proposed are favorable, mainly to the because of the lack of the stormwater pond there. That's going to disappear. Is that right?
Ms. Weens?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, in terms of dealing with the stormwater management solution, they are looking at a different alternative that won't need a stormwater management pond. They've had considerable discussions with our public works staff with regards to that design and the new system that they want to utilize. As a result, those lands that were part of the stormwater management pond aren't needed in the subdivision. They will be added to the additional lands that the developer has acquired, and they will be subject to, again, some other type of future development application. But the focus is on getting the subdivision plan finalized and registered.
Councillor?
Yes, thank you. I thought I think the request is a reasonable one to make, given the amount of change that's gone on, and I think it's 1 year is well worth spending if it improves the situation with the stormwater pond and the rest of the infrastructure that we have. So I'll be voting in favor of this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. If I may, Ms. Weens, I also noticed in the report that the sewage pumping station looks to be oversized, so that if further development takes place in the area other than this proposed development, that the town will be able to use that extra capacity. Is that true?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, the pumping station has been sized to certainly accommodate additional lands that are in the urban area of Fenwick. We wouldn't want to be creating constructing a pumping station that is only sized for this one development. That wouldn't be very prudent. And so it is being sized to accommodate some additional lands, and those lands that are in the urban boundary that currently are not connected, that are serviced by private septic systems. In the future, they would be allowed to also connect to sanitary sewer.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I will turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your next item on the agenda. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive memo application for zoning bylaw amendment north side of Pancake Lane, file number AM 07-2020, and that Council receive report 2022-19 recommendation for zoning bylaw amendment north side of Pancake Lane for information as pertains to file number AM-07-2020, and that Council direct planning staff to prepare the necessary zoning bylaw amendment for consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions or discussion on this item? I see Councillor Kaur.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mrs. Weens. Could you just explain what this report is asking us to vote on?
Ms. Weens?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, we did a report that was deferred back in February. So we're bringing that report back. This is for zoning bylaw amendment for property adjacent to the Glad Tidings Church on Pancake Lane. And it would permit a 4-story, 40-unit apartment building if the zoning is approved. So that's what we're asking for. There is certainly the recommendation report and the additional information that was provided by the applicant's consultant is included, which address some of the questions and issues that were raised by neighbors.
Councillor?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I wouldn't be voting, I will be voting against this proposal. I just feel that this is not the right development for the neighborhood. What scares me the most is that we have an adjacent land to the west. And if we approve this development, I could see a twin building right beside it. This in a few years. And also across the street, a potential for another apartment building. I'm not against development. I always believe if you grow, you are successful. But we have to have a right development for our communities. So we will be in a win-win scenarios for the developer and especially for the residents who spent their entire lives living in that community. And I just, you know, every piece of property that is vacant, we're putting 4-story apartment buildings in. And 20 years from now or 30 years from now, you know, we worry about climate change. Our whole community will have more cars and runoff of water. And it's just that we just need to develop within our community. And I won't be supporting this.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. What concerns me is it seems like the request by council for an additional conciliatory meeting between the parties resolves nothing other than they resolve each to hold their own positions. I find that very unacceptable. It really doesn't put me in a position to accept it. I can't believe they couldn't do anything about parking. I can't believe they couldn't do anything with the location of the building. I can't believe they couldn't do anything with the driveway on the east side, their height density. They're saying that stormwater management is dependent upon the reconstruction of Pancake Lane. I just don't find this developer has come to this council with the proper information for me to approve it. Therefore, I will definitely not be approving it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Perhaps Ms. Weens, any comments on the meetings that the developer had with the area residents and the changes that he has made to the original plans?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, there was certainly a meeting with the parties, and town staff attended that meeting in effort to try to facilitate some resolution of the issues. The applicant's consultants prepared a revised plan that looked at shifting the building and its location and the driveway, and shared that information with the neighbors. And they determined that shifting the building and relocating the driveway entrance would have resulted in more impact on the residential uses, and felt that it's important to minimize those impacts. And so they are indicating that the building and the driveway will be located where it is. Certainly, Public Works staff have reviewed it in terms of the stormwater management and the design, and the overall site design has also been reviewed by town staff. And town staff feel that the proposal is appropriate in this area, it being on a collector road. We, from a staff perspective, from a planning and engineering perspective, we don't have any concern with the proposal. Certainly the infrastructure can handle the development. This is a zoning amendment application. What would follow if this gets approved would be the site plan approval process. And so that is still an approval that would still be required. We're just dealing with the zoning at this stage.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Weens. Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, so I recognize you're only dealing with the zoning at this stage, but I'm looking at the the parking study that was done and provided several pages. And table 2, it has a parking deficiency of four spaces. So unless I'm reading that incorrectly, if it's only one parking stall per dwelling unit and there's 40 units, it's a deficiency of 4. So is that how I'm to understand it, or is there more information here?
Ms. Weens? Ms.
One
Weens?
moment, just one moment,
Oh.
Mr. Mayor, while I get to that table.
Okay, sorry.
There's a second table as well, table 3. Again, it's using a different multiplier. So there's confusion between the two, and I just want to understand if there's going to be sufficient parking at the end of the day, recognizing we're still in the zoning bylaw phase right now, but they're already supplying us this information, so obviously this must be their plan.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. Sorry about that. So table 2 is the analysis of the parking requirements vis-a-vis the town zoning bylaw, and it shows a deficiency of 4 spaces meeting the parking requirements. The consultants then looked at what is the Institute of Transportation Engineers parking generation kind of handbook, and the analysis that's included in that engineering guideline with respect to parking, and compared the requirements in that. And if you use those benchmarks that are in the Institute of Transportation Engineers parking handbook, there would be a surplus of 11 spaces. And then they've looked at other municipalities in terms of parking requirements, and then also did a transportation demand analysis with respect to parking, and overall concluded that the spaces that are being provided on the site is adequate and would meet the needs for this development. But part of the zoning amendment that was being requested is to allow for a reduction of the parking in the town's zoning standards. But overall, the parking analysis prepared by the engineering professionals, they qualified it and felt that the parking supply on site was appropriate for this development.
So further to that, the reason I asked the question is if we're using, so if our parking requirements as they stand right now are from 1987, I believe it is. And we, of course, I'm sure can agree that there are definitely more people with more cars now than in 1987. So that being said, we still don't have our parking study formalized, right? We've only had kind of a draft provided to us. I thought this was coming back to us sooner than later, but because we haven't gotten that formalized, we don't have anything to approve at this point. Yeah, we're looking at this as 1987, and then in the next table you're using, or they are using an engineering guideline. Is the engineering guideline from pre-1987 then? How can it be a lower number? This is where my confusion lies. So we're kind of a little bit of a cart before the horse. So we'd be looking at something to approve now before we even have our final parking study done. So this is a bit premature, recognizing that this is still in the zoning phase, but still they're obviously providing this because this is their intention.
Ms. Weens?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I can, the Institute of Transportation parking generation manual is from 2019, so it is far more current than our zoning bylaw in terms of parking demand ratios and supply analysis. So it's from 2019.
But wouldn't then, based on those tables, then that would mean that the numbers from 2019 provided in their booklet are essentially using a baseline that is suggesting fewer parking stalls are required in 2019 than in 1987. That doesn't make any sense to me. I can't be the only one on council that would recognize that in 2019 there's more cars than in 1987. So this doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, at this point, this question I'd want this answered before I approve anything. So if perhaps staff can look into this, please.
Ms. Weens, any further comments?
Well, Mr. Mayor, this is a report that was prepared by a transportation and parking specialist. They are looking at, guidelines that are accepted by all over North America, and it's this transportation engineers parking generation manual that's often used and referred to create parking standards in zoning bylaws, and it's the 2019 edition, so it's more current than our zoning bylaw.
But at the same time, with what I've just said, I mean, in your own opinion, unless I'm completely reading this chart wrong, that the guideline is suggesting again that in 2019 there's less demand for parking stalls than in 1987. So that's an issue, that's a problem. I'd love to hear from my fellow councillors if they think that isn't a bit of a head scratcher on that one. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Thank you, Councillor. I would, if I can just comment that again, as we've always argued on parking, the number of parking spots do not increase with the number of cars on the road, and we go down into the environment. The planners do not like to see lots of parking spaces and blacktop. I know, Councillor Stewart, what you're going to say, but the bottom line is that the number of parking spots are actually going down from what they were in 1987, and that is across North America. I can, Ms. Weens, would you confirm that statement?
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, that seems to certainly be the case. We've seen it in our own parking study. The draft that was provided by the consultants have also indicated that. And we've seen it in this example with the analysis that was done by the professional consultants looking at parking generation and trip generation for apartment style accommodation or dwelling units. So it is done with all of that detailed analysis and understanding of trip generation and parking requirements for those types of land uses. And so it might feel that this is unusual, that, our standards in 1987 were high or were excessive compared to today. But that is, quite frankly, that is the case. And, the parking study was done by someone who's very qualified in this and knowledgeable about parking and traffic and parking requirements, demands, and trip generation.
Thank you. Councillor Hahn?
Through the mayor, so earlier in our conversation, I believe when we were talking about the EV stations, it was either perhaps Councillor Wink or perhaps Councillor Olson who mentioned that the average household now is, I think, 1.5 vehicles per household. It was okay, yeah, the hand goes up. So Councillor Olson mentioned that. So that's a higher number than it was in 87. So if more people have more cars that they own, they got to park them somewhere. And if it's like, this is mathematics. Like, I don't understand how this can be that. This is apparently just going to be lost on me then. If we have more people having more car or vehicle ownership, then they have to park them somewhere. And then in addition to that, there still has to be stalls for visitors to visit them. So I think this is an issue, and I'd still like to wait for our parking study to come back in its final format.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in agreement with Councillor Hahn. The chart shows a deficit of 4 spaces, but yet I think the number we were given was that there's a surplus of 11 spaces. So I cannot reconcile that math in my head. And again, I will, as you commented, I will, bring forward my permeable surface solution for runoff again.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Olson. No, you on mute, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At least once in the evening I do that. So,
Yes.
Yes, I believe the documentation I saw called for permeable surfaces on the parking lot, which is one of the things that I wrote down as appreciating for the proposal. I also appreciate the fact that the parking lot was positioned so it didn't interfere with the roots of some very mature trees on the next property. Now, looking at this, we have a shortage of affordable housing, and compact lifestyles are cheaper than the much more expensive places that we have in the community. And I think it's important that we maintain this because I've had people who are very distressed because they have to leave their homes and have to leave the town that they've lived in for years and probably grew up in. So I'm still going to be voting in favor of this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Olson. Councillor Wink, you had your hand up.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I had the same comment as Councillor Olson with respect to the permeable pavers in the parking lot, and much appreciate the fact that that someone's looking at these without us having to request it. I'm trying to look through all the documentation here, and there was something that was comparing the the buildings to the buildings in the surrounding area. And the one apartment building I think it's on the corner of it's on the south side of Pancake on Pelham Street. It's just trying to find the number. Yeah, I don't have the municipal number, but a few years back, there was an approval on that property for a 4-story apartment building. The individual didn't proceed with it, but there was an approval for that particular property. As far as the subject lands and the fact that a comment was made that something can be built to the west and like it's going to continue on. Well, the property to the west is the church. The only way that that's going to be done is if the church sells off that property, and I wouldn't think it would be too likely that would happen. The other comment I would make is there was a request to move the subject building further west and then have the driveway on the east side of the property. To me, I'm not a planner or a developer or whatever, but that doesn't make an awful lot of sense where you've got 2 driveways for 2 apartment buildings with, I'm thinking probably 7 meters apart. It's a little too tight for the driveways. In all honesty, if we don't approve this, it's going to go to the OMB and we're going to be in the same situation as we were at the other end of Pancake Street. Unless this council puts something forward that wants to eliminate the OMB and we can decide what our town can look like, and all the other municipalities in Ontario say the same thing, it's going to go to, it's not OMB anymore, it's not LPAT. I'm not even sure what the letters are today, and it'll be different tomorrow. But we turn this down, we're going to lose it, and it's going to cost the town thousands of dollars all over again. And that's reality to fight it. And we won't have a leg to stand on. I'm sorry. Like, I hear what you're saying, but you know, we're going to set ourselves up for failure going on this property again. So the residents in the area might not like what I'm about to say, but I'm going to support this.
Thank you, Councilor Wink. Okay, so everyone has spoken once now, so I'll go back to Councilor Kaur.
You, Mr. Mayor. To Mrs. Wayne, is this a low housing project? Is it a rental or is it condos?
Ms. Weens?
Mr. Mayor, through you, I believe it's a condominium apartment building, so it'll be ownership. I don't know what it will be marketed towards or sold as. But they are
So
they are 1 and 2 bedroom size units.
So it won't be low housing.
I can't answer that, Councillor Kaur. I don't know.
And then one last question. Who sold the property to the developers? Was it the church?
Ms. Weens?
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, the church, this portion of the land did belong with the church. The church severed this in 2017 and it was sold. It was land that the church was not using.
Okay,
and I
thank
think
you.
with respect to the parking, it's a reduction that's being requested from 1.5 spaces per unit to 1.4 spaces per unit. So that's the request in the zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay, thank you. I guess before I go back to councils, I will say that I will support this. I hear this all the time at the region, that this is ideal. This development is ideal for this situation. There's already an apartment building there. We have the infrastructure already going by it. It doesn't have to have any infrastructure improvements. This is exactly what planning should be about. It's called infilling, and I will totally support this. Thank you. Mayor, Councillor Stewart, I believe you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I understand what Councillor Wink was saying, but my take on it is if we just give in to the developer and say, go ahead with, the thing is, I think Councillor Wink also said that, we should be in the position to be making the decisions on how our town looks going forward. And if we just say, well, go ahead, we're not making that decision. We're leaving it in the hands of the developer. And then the next developer that comes along and it's the same issue again, you can't say no, because once you say yes once, you've stuck your foot in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Wink.
Yeah, so just for clarification, a number of municipalities have put in requests to the provincial government to eliminate the OMB, or whatever the heck it's called. It's just been requests of municipalities. It's not a reality yet, and it could be quite some time before that ever becomes a reality. So I understand what you're saying, but at this point in time, we don't have a leg to stand on. The other thing that I'll ask through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director, if this were institutional, what type of building can be built on that land?
Ms. Weens?
So if it was institutional, it could be apartment. Because the institutional zoning does permit a seniors apartment building that requires 1 space per unit.
And how many?
I believe the building height is 35 feet, which means you could get 4th story in the roof structure.
Yeah, so So we're going from institutional to R2, and basically providing the same size of building on this property.
Ms. Weems?
Pretty much, yes. Yes, pretty much.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? I see Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor to the director of planning. So earlier, Councillor Wink said that we wouldn't have a leg to stand on at LPAT, or whatever it's called.
Ontario Land Tribunal.
There you go, LPAT. But if right now what they're asking for is the difference, as you said, is our standard is 1.5 and they're trying to take it down to 1.4, then they aren't meeting our minimum threshold right now. So that alone is our leg with which we can stand. I mean, I don't understand, because that is we have a bar and you need to meet that. And if you haven't, then why can't we say we want the 1.5? That's the difference of whatever 5 or whatever it was spots. That's our requirement.
Ms. Weems?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So yes, that's our zoning bylaw requirement. And the applicants feel that they've rationalized that request. They've undertaken the parking analysis, and they are providing bicycle parking on site and in the building, so that there is alternatives to having a car. And based on their analysis, report that was done, and looking at various considerations and other parking standards in other municipalities for similar types of uses, and then looking at what the International Transportation Engineers Parking Manual has for identifying parking requirements for an apartment building of this size. They have rationalized that this site and the development is appropriate and can accommodate the required parking for this development. And despite our zoning bylaw requirement of 1.5 spaces. And so they feel fairly strongly that they've rationalized their request to support 1.4 spaces per dwelling unit.
So in the past 3 years that we've been in council, how many other times have we held other developers to that standard and made them fulfill our 1.5? In other words, so other developers have had to meet our standard, but now this developer gets off the hook. I'm just wondering, can you provide kind of a ballpark of how many times we've done this, made other people hold to our standard, and here we're not going to do that?
Ms. Weems?
Mr. Mayor, through you, I can indicate to you that there's been lots of developments that have been approved that either through the Committee of Adjustment that varied that standard, or through zoning bylaw amendments that varied that standard. We just dealt with a apartment building at 1518 Pelham Street that varied that standard. The parking at 1440 Pelham Street had variances approved through the Committee of Adjustment that varied that standard. So, I mean, there's two, and I'd have to go back and research other apartment buildings that may have been approved but those are the two that come off the top of my head.
By the committee, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, one was a zoning amendment by this council. The other one was by the Committee of Adjustment.
Thank you. Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. Our draft zoning bylaws for apartment buildings, what's the bylaw indicating?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have to look that up. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Okay.
One moment, bear with me.
Okay. Perhaps while you're looking that up, Ms. Weems.
1.25.
I thought Mr. Cribbs, Mr. CEO, did you have your hand up?
I did. I think the piece of advice I'd like to give for your consideration, really comes down to what role you see for yourselves here, because right now you are the approval authority. But we are just talking about zoning of the property. A number of things, concerns we've aired are dealt with further down the process, further down the line. And if we say no, then Ontario Land Tribunal is a, we don't know for sure, but it is a distinct possibility. If you say yes, keeping in mind that one could already build a building roughly this size, 4 stories tall, right there under one category, and they're just trying to switch categories, right, into residential. So that's the distinction, which isn't a large one. The question is, would you like to continue to be the approval authority and to have things to negotiate and the capacity to interact and try to make sure that if a development is going to occur, it's substantially, to the betterment of the community? We're still very early in this process. And it just seems unfortunate that we would give up our capacity to have some influence and control at this stage, which is fundamentally what we're talking about with a negative vote. I will remind council that less than 6 months ago, the region came to us with our growth targets, and one of those was our infill development. So we are obligated to get to 29,000 people, no choice. En route to 29,000, I don't have the exact percentage in front of me, Ms. Weens, but it was just under 20. 18, 19 was our infill development target. That's very close to correct.
Yes.
And so for easy math, 1 application in 5, all things being equal, needs to be an infill development target. These are the arguments that one gets to put forth in front of the OLT en route to approval. Keeping in mind, this is a chance that what's being suggested here is a building that doesn't dwarf the very large church beside it. It's not night and day difference on the streetscape. Although we're not at that point yet. Right now, we're talking about zoning. So, council, you have every right to decline this for some of the reasons various members of council have indicated. And maybe that is the right decision for the community. But for us to continue to have influence, then what you actually need to do is approve this and then carry on to the next part of the conversation. So that's my basic submission to you, is looking at the battle and the war, if you will, and deciding which one ought to be won tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. CAO. Ms. Weens, did we leave you looking up some figures?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, the draft bylaw, zoning bylaw that's been out for public comment and circulation has 1.25 parking spaces for an apartment dwelling and 1 bicycle parking space for every 4 units in the apartment building.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion before we call the vote? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
3, Mr. Mayor, thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next item of business, which is a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0112 Niagara Region Waste Collection Temporary Arrangement for Summerside's Meadows Development for information, and that Council authorize staff to enter into an indemnification agreement with the Niagara Region, allowing the Niagara Region's waste collection contractor to access 3 temporary parking collection points from the Summerside's Muse development through the town-owned property at the Meridian Community Center until such time that Summerside's Muse Lane is fully constructed and accessible. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any discussion, questions on this item before us? Not seeing any. Pretty straightforward, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that Council receive memo update restricted acts provisions of the Municipal Act 2001, Section 275, lame duck for information, and that Council receive report 2022-0055, clerk's restricted acts provision pursuant to Section 275 of the Municipal Act 2001 for information, and that Council direct the town clerk to prepare and present a delegation of authority bylaw for certain acts during a lame duck period for Council's consideration at the next regular meeting of Council. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any, I see Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I was the one who brought this up at the last meeting. I asked staff because I thought that the previous council, when they did a lame duck, restricted the amount of authority of the CAO. Since then, we found out that that wasn't the case, and I apologize for that. I obviously heard wrong when I was monitoring the last council's deliberations on lame duck. It's also been brought to our attention that all the other municipalities in the region do not have dollar restrictions on their CAO with respect to lame duck. So I would like to withdraw my suggestion of limiting the CAO, and to your point last week, Mr. Mayor, that we've hired our CAO to do a job. He's been honest, and his integrity is without question as far as I'm concerned. So I would like to go to the original motion that was presented at last council meeting.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor Wink. Any other comments, questions on the motion before us? Not seeing any. I'd just like to suggest that there is always the resort of an ankle bracelet if we decide we have to go that way. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. 1. Bylaw number 4449, 2022, being a bylaw to set the rate of taxation for the year 2022. 2. Bylaw number 4450, 2022, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 1136, 1987, as amended for lands located on the south side of Quaker Road west of Clare Avenue, legally described as part of lot 237 and part 1 on Registered Plan 59R-728 in the town of Pelham. The zoning bylaw amendment rezones the lands from the residential 1 R1 zone to residential multiple RM1281H to be amended to residential multiple 1 RM1281H zone. Homes by Antonio Limited, file number AM01-2021. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions, discussion on these bylaws? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The vote begins with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to the motions, and we do have a motion on the agenda put forth by Councillor Wink regarding parking at the MCC. Councillor Wink, would you like to read your motion into the record?
Yes, thank you. Let me get it here. So, where staff have been previously directed by council to prepare a report pertaining to the town's parking bylaw and its application to the Meridian Community Center, and whereas staff have previously reported on various options to create temporary parking facilities in the vicinity of the MCC, and whereas town council has received the draft report of the municipal parking study from RV Anderson Associates on April 4th, 2022. And whereas the draft municipal parking study indicates that the current parking supply at the MCC is inadequate to meet demand during peak periods. And whereas the town owns a parcel of vacant land to the south and east of the MCC facility. Now, therefore, staff are directed to provide a report to council which details options for use of the vacant lands, including analysis of the benefits and drawbacks associated with the sale of the lands, with potential apportionment of some amount of land for sale and some amount for retention of land for increased parking, and with retention of the entirety of the lands for parking, and any other options deemed advisable by staff. And staff are further directed to assess the cost of incorporating low impact development characteristics into the design and cost of any potential parking lot, including but not limited to permeable pavement, specialized stormwater features, and potential use of botanical features to reduce runoff. And staff are further directed to draft any closed session companion report they deem necessary or appropriate to address legal ramifications of potential sale of land for specific purposes and or cost valuations of the lands in question, and that said report or reports are to be delivered to council by June 20th, 2022.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That motion has been moved by Councillor Wink and seconded by Councillor Stewart, and it may be open for discussion.
Okay, and before we open it, Councillor Wink, any further comments to your motion?
Yeah, this council early on in our term looked at Part 4 and took it off the market for real estate, knowing that there was some potential need for more parking spots at the MCC. I think we've done our investigation. I wish this would have been done earlier. Unfortunately, the parking study got delayed and whatever, but now it's time for us to look at what our options are for that parcel and have a fulsome discussion on potential.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wink. And Councillor Stewart, you seconded the motion. Any comments?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, an investigation I think is warranted, but I think as part of that investigation, I guess I should have put this forward earlier, that as part of it, excuse me, consideration for parking should also be given to the possibility that the library might move to the location. And then there's also the discussion of having a civic square out front. So I think that needs to be also involved in the staff report.
Mr. CAO, any comments on that, perhaps?
Well, I think Councillor Stewart makes a very good point that any analysis we do has to make reference to at least the theoretical possibility of adding the library to the MCC and what that would or wouldn't do for demand. I'm much more hesitant to discuss the Civic Square. Firstly, council is aware that there is a process for which the town has paid money, taxpayer money, currently underway, reviewing some options for that. And I don't want to inadvertently put a cart before the horse. Realistically, there's no way to turn those lands into parking. And we also know, of course, that we've sold the lands that are adjacent to what we're calling Civic Square these days, and that it's somewhere in the process of hopefully turning into both seniors long-term care and seniors housing. So I think it's an excellent point with respect to the library. I think it's not an ideal type of analysis with respect to Civic Square, because there are other pieces that need to fall into place, specifically vis-a-vis the development, the private development that we hope will be considerable amount of senior the continuum of care for the senior citizens. And more to the point, those lands really have some limitations on how they can be used. But right now we're paying and waiting for a report that will be coming back to this council. I don't know exactly when, but sometime this term of council. So if we could, whether you want us to just take direction, we've certainly heard the idea, and I think that's entirely appropriate for the analysis vis-a-vis the library. If you want to force us to, I think, but I left to our own devices, I don't think we would do any analysis on Civic Square. So I think that would require a council majority, because I really don't think that's appropriate, given that we're waiting to hear back from our architect. And we know at the staff level that there's been a lot of public excitement looking at the diagrams and the sort of the models, I guess, if you will, at the MCC and the online commentary. So I think there's a fair bit of public excitement generated on those. I don't think we should interrupt that process just now.
Councillor Stewart, are you willing to drop the Civic Square analysis at this time?
Yes, I am, but it does make me nervous that if that in fact does happen, we will be facing a serious shortfall. But I'm willing to drop that for now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. When we're undertaking these studies, I'd hate to see the Ridgeville parking situation ignored. Those folks have been asking for consideration of pavement on the parking lot across the street, and those are tax-paying enterprises, and I think that that should be in the consideration of this. That's, to me, is what I would call low-hanging fruit, because it's it's not a huge expense, and may even be able to do it within the operating budgets as we see them before the end of the year. The other thing I'd like to mention, Mr. Mayor, is I'm not satisfied at all with the parking study for several reasons, and several of them were discussed at the last meeting. And so I went back and looked at parking studies in general, and one of the most difficult things in the world must be to calculate what parking demand is going to be, because we've never got into the number of hours that people are spending. We've not got into that. The study that we had was basically based upon demand projections that are reported as if they're unavoidable. And I don't think that the demand that we have in front of us is I think it is avoidable. We should be considering some of the things like demand management, and they were pointed out in the report, and they included such things as better pavement marking, signage, and these were all things that were valued at under $10,000 a piece. Pavement marking, for example, in Fenwick would be to mark off the pavement so people park in the proper spots. There's all kinds of things like that, low-hanging type fruit. And we didn't consider the fact that we have a Canada Games arena built within 10 miles of our facility. What's the demand going to be for our building when that gets into full service. That is a low cost operation because it has an entirely different debt structure. And they're going to try and fill it. And I'll bet you they fill it with price. We haven't considered COVID. Who's going to come back? The amount of driving per hour has gone way down because of COVID. That has to be taken into account before we spend any money. I think those are the things that fit into demand projection. What about scheduling? I think there's lots of things that can be done in scheduling before we get into spending money. We should be looking for the low cost, no cost alternatives because I believe they're out there, and the consultant has pointed to a few of them. So I would like to see I don't want to stop the consideration of this. I want it to be part of it, but the models we use, that we're always using models that assume that faster is always better than slower travel, for example. And I think we should make sure we consider all factors like that before we spend any money. And I certainly want to see the folks in Ridgeville considered as part of the study. Thank you.
So if I can clarify before I go to another counselor, Councilor Olson, then you're supportive of this staff study, but you would like to see included with this study a cost analysis of the parking in Ridgeville, the parking lot on the other side of the road. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Just to be clear. Okay, Councilor Wink.
Yeah, so this motion is specifically towards the MCC, and I do not discount the Ridgeville parking. It's something that we've talked about, or the business owners from Ridgeville came to council probably 2.5 years ago now. And I agree something's got to be done. It's got to be done soon. I'm not sure if it's an out of budget item if we do it. So whether it's appropriate that we do an out of budget item at this point in time, or we ensure that it gets put on the consideration for the 2023 budget. So maybe it's another motion that is presented exclusive of this motion. I think we're talking about two different things, and I don't want to really muddy the waters on this particular motion, and would suggest that we, if you want to do a further analysis on Ridgeville, that we put another motion forward.
Okay, so again, just to be clear then, Councillor, this is your motion, so you wouldn't consider this a friendly motion then? Friendly motion.
I would think that it would have to be a separate motion that we look at it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Corr.
Yes, I fully agree with Councillor Wink. Let's vote on this. And if there was another motion, we talked about the Ridgeway several times. So let's get one motion done. And if someone wants to put another motion up, then we'll vote on that. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Court. Any other questions or comments on the motion? I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to the staff. What I'd like to recommend is there was a phenomenal study done and reported on October the 24th, 2016 on the complete MCC and the parking. And it talks about greening the parking lot and all the factors involved in green. Basically, when you looked at the inside of the building, virtually nothing was done. You look at the outside, they didn't do what was recommended there either. So I would like the staff to go back and pull out this report and take a look at it as far as parking, because they talk about greening parking lots. And that's what I'd like to see as part of the staff report when they come back with Councillor Wink's motion. And yes, I agree. Let's not muddy the waters. There's a process in which motions should come forward to council, and I think we should follow that. And Councillor Wink did it the proper way. He brought it before us last council meeting, and we're discussing it this week. If Councillor Olson wants to do something about Ridgeville, he should bring it next council meeting And we should talk about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever the process is. Follow the process. That's why we got processes. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I see Councillor Olson. Go ahead.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I accept that, and I'll be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions on the motion brought forward by Councillor Wink and seconded by Councillor Stewart? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be ready first, second, and third time and passed, being bylaw number 4451-2022, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 3rd day of May 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Any discussion on this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for, May 16th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion, council? Not seeing any?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is 7:54 p.m. and you can gavel out your meeting.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Night all.
Thank you, everyone.
Night.